Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my Veterans to Success podcast. You probably know by now, my mission is to help 1 million veterans and entrepreneur business owners achieve the dreams, goals, and aspirations they deserve. That is why I created the Veterans to Success podcast, because I get to interview guys, men and women, who want to share their fascinating stories with you about their time before, during and after their time in the military, so you can benefit and overcome your challenges. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be mesmerized, astounded, and entertained. Hello and welcome to another episode of Veterans to Success, the podcast where I get to speak to seemingly ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And today I've got with me a very special Dr. Elizabeth Carr. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you today?
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining me. And you know the score by now. Listeners could probably detect that you're not from this side of the pond, you're from the other side of the pond, and we're going to be talking about that. And you're going to do a reveal as we go along, because as you know, there's no big fanfare for the common man or woman on the introduction, right? You got an extraordinary story, and I want you to share that with us. Starting at, right, tell me what was going on when you were a young girl, you know, running around playing the playground or whatever you did as a young girl. What was going on and what was going through your mind?
So when I was a young girl, my mother started a Girl Scout troop, and it was a very important part of my social development. The times that we were outside of school, much were in hiking and camping and doing service work and earning badges, selling cookies. So that was a big part of my childhood.
Yeah, I remember that. Not being a Girl Guide, of course, I was a Cub Scout, and getting those badges and those achievement awards that you could stitch on your arm, which was another great thing. I don't know how your stitching was. Mine wasn't great, but I still had a go. And that was part of climbing the ladder to success in that regime, wasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, although I didn't realize it till much later, but it was the very first time I had an opportunity to tap into my own entrepreneurial spirit in terms of wanting to sell the most cookies in my troop and looking for that cookie sign-up sheet to fill every single line of orders.
Yeah, well, we had the same sort of stuff with Bob a Job. You know, a bob was a form of currency. I don't know what you'd have, a nickel or something. And you go down and you do a job for a bob. So you'd be paid for doing a little thing like helping someone across the road or cleaning something up. So you found that you had a competitive edge to you at an early age, didn't you? So
absolutely.
So the first thing you mentioned was your mother. So you had a big bond with your parents. How did that go? And your siblings? What was going on there?
So I was an only child, which probably helped, although my mother had a full-time job with the government. She worked for the Department of Education, and my father worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, both DC government workers. But because I was an only child, she had time in addition to her full-time job to take on this responsibility of Girl Scout troop leader, which she did for, I don't know, at least a decade.
Right.
And yeah. I remember at times saying things to her like, well, I should get to be in the front seat when we go someplace because I'm the daughter of the leader. And she would say, nope, no special treatment, get in the back.
So you were put in place. That was great. So that was good grounding, wasn't it? And I suppose, absolutely. And how did that affect your psyche as you went through life?
I think that both of my parents did a really good job of putting me into an appropriate place. I remember one day I went to one of my math classes in middle school, and the teacher started class by handing out 6 detention slips. And he said, I'm going to start giving detention for everyone who writes on the desk with their pencils. I spent an hour yesterday cleaning off all of the pencil writing on everyone's desk. And for you 6, it was your desk last night. So I couldn't quite articulate it, but I knew that it couldn't possibly be fair to start having a punishment for a crime that is only announced today. So I go home with righteous indignation to tell my father all about this absolute injustice and hoping he was going to have my back. And he heard me out completely. And then he took a pause and he looked at me and he said, "Did you write on the desk?" And at that point, I realized he's not going to have my back. In a good way, in a good way. You know, I think so often now in the States, it seems like parents almost pathologically have their children's back in a sense of defending them when they've done the indefensible. And I think that it's important to have some balance in that regard in terms of moral development.
And that's a great point, actually, because you're talking about the indefensible. If you commit the crime, do the time, right? You know, whatever it is, and we get the same here as well. I'd love to see a parenting exam that you have to do way before conception, right? If you could just do that before the baby's on the way, that might make people think twice, because there's no guidebook, is there? It's a pretty tough job to do it right.
And I think people spend a lot of time during pregnancy taking classes like Lamaze classes, preparing for childbirth. But really, it's everything that comes after the birth. It's really the heavy lift. And if we had more classes to prepare people for some of the basics, foundations of parenting, I think it would be really helpful to people.
Yeah, definitely. So you go through school understanding that if you're going to write on the desk or something of an equivalent wrongdoing, you were going to be punished, accept punishment, and your parents weren't going to say anything to the contrary. What part of your life was it that made you lean towards a military career?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, the teachers would frequently say how difficult it was to be in the field of mental health and getting clients and having a business. They made it seem really daunting and intimidating. While I was in grad school, I had a paid job at an emergency room hospital doing evaluations. And I had a training rotation at Great Lakes Naval Hospital at the same time. And I was able to contrast those two environments, the for-profit healthcare environment and the capitated system military environment. And I found the military to be so much more enjoyable in the sense of not having to worry about how can people pay for their care, because it was all included in their military service. So when it was time to apply for internship, I applied for it's like a residency, my internship year with the military. I was accepted. And for that training year, you have 3 years of required get back active duty time. And I believe it was 5 more years after that of individual ready reserve if you got off. I chose to stay for 6 years and then had just a few more years on the individual ready reserve list.
And yeah, of course, because that's a great point. Because in the UK, we have the National Health Service, the NHS, which we don't pay for. Although I think that something may be happening with that in some way, shape, or form in the future. At the point of need, though, you don't pay. Whereas that's different in the States, isn't it, in the United States? How does it work over there, and how did that make you feel? Because obviously it was a big tug on your, on you felt about the people needed the treatment, and yet they couldn't afford it. Tough.
I think it's a complex situation. There are pros and cons to every system, but I think our system has more cons than pros. It's very compartmentalized. We have Medicaid and Medicare, and then private insurance. And capitated systems like Kaiser Permanente, which is an HMO. What I found when I was working in the emergency room is somebody could come in floridly psychotic, actively psychotic. Clearly, they need help. And I could spend an hour on the phone with an insurance company, only at the end of the call to have a 23-hour bed approved. And you would think after all that time investment of being on the phone, surely they could approve more than 23 hours. But that's just how the system is set up. And it can be just so discouraging and frustrating for people and providers and feel like a huge waste of time. If you fill out the paperwork to get paid by an insurance company and they don't like the way you filled out the paperwork, months later, they can do what's called a clawback and take all the money back out of your account. because the code wasn't right or something like that. And so navigating the system can be very precarious, I think, for healthcare workers here in this country.
Definitely. So you chose the military strand, and how did that go? What were you up to during basic training, if you like, and then as your career advanced?
Yeah, so you start with what we call here Officer Indoctrination School, which is a intensive few week program for all of what in our group was the miscellaneous people, the pharmacist and the JAG officers and the nurses and everybody that was medical other than physicians. Teach you how to wear a uniform, how to salute, and all of the basics. And then you're off to the internship year, which for me was in Portsmouth, Virginia. I really enjoyed it. I had wanted to travel all my life. When I was a young child, I had fantasies of being a flight attendant because I thought that was the way to see the world.
Right.
And so the Navy also provided an opportunity for that. When I finished my internship year, eventually I had the opportunity to do a 3-year tour with my then husband in Italy. He's also active duty, was a psychiatrist eventually. And it was a wonderful opportunity to live overseas and to have a job where you can still speak your own language and work in your own profession and see the world at the same time. It was wonderful.
So you were with your husband on a posting to Italy, which was a dream posting for you. You got a 3-year tour there. And what sort of things did you get up to, and what did you discover about yourself and Europe, I suppose, and the European culture?
Absolutely. So, so we met on internship year, and when that year was finished, we each went away to our first duty station. He was on a ship in Earl, New Jersey. I was in Jacksonville, Florida. When you are military married to another military member, you have priority in duty stations. So I think early career, we probably wouldn't have been able to request something like Italy, but because we were co-locating, we were able to ask for that plum of a tour and got it, which was wonderful. We were there for 3 years, and during that time, we had our first year living together, getting used to being married and cohabitating in the same house. And the second year, growing a baby, and the third year, having a new baby, and came back with him as a 1-year-old.
Fantastic. So he has a European passport then? Or a joint passport? He's got a US passport.
Well, when you're military and you have a child on a duty station, like in Italy, he does not have any rights to Italian citizenship.
Right, yeah, of course, yeah, got you.
Yeah, and so people ask that. It's a very common question, but he does not. But we have since come back to Italy with him visiting, just so he could see the town where he was born and everything, and it's pretty special to us.
Yeah, well, he'll always have that tie anyway, and that's pretty much like that. That's pretty much like UK forces as well. So yeah. So what did you enjoy the most about Italy, and what sort of role did you play there?
So
let me just add to that question. How did you manage? Because a lot of the time you were there for 3 years, you were bringing up a child and you were carrying your son. So a lot of that time that was like mothering, wasn't it? So how did that fit in with your career?
Yeah, in the American military, when you have a baby, you have only 6 weeks off for maternity leave. I had a colleague who was there who was already a mother, and she said, just burn 2 extra weeks of vacation. It'll be worth it to you to have a full 2 months leave. And that was excellent advice. So I did that. We were extremely fortunate when we first arrived to our duty station, and Russ was a GMO, General Medical Officer, at a clinic that saw both active duty and their family member dependents.
Yeah.
A woman approached him and she said, Dr. Carr, I love babies. I love babies. Do you and your wife have any kids? If you have a kid, you let me know. I want to be your nanny.
Wow.
And 2 years later, when we did have a baby, she said, I still meant it and I want to be your nanny. And she was wonderful. So it really helped me to go back to work because she would come to our home every day and watch the baby, and she was great with kids. It could be such a stressful thing, I think, for moms to be confident about who they're going to entrust with their child. We're very fortunate that way. And I think if you have a pretty easy pregnancy without medical complications, traveling around Europe while pregnant is an easy thing to do. And if you have a newborn and you're nursing, it's also really easy to travel. It's when they get to be close to 1 year old and they start to be mobile and they want to crawl everywhere and they have a lot of accoutrement that you have to bring with you, then it starts to get really difficult. And right at that age where it started to get difficult, we were transferred back to the States. So I think we were incredibly fortunate about the timing.
Right, so the timing was just spot on. Yeah, good.
Spot on, yes.
So when you went back to the States, what was sort of thing was going through your mind? Because as you've said, your 1-year-old son now is becoming mobile, active, wanting to learn and discover about the world. And if it was anything like my 3 sons, he was off. As soon as he had the opportunity, he'd be gone.
Yeah. No more enjoying restaurants with the 1-year-old. Absolutely, that's for sure. So when we came back, which was now about 20 years ago, the Iraq War was in full swing, and I would have been deployed for sure as a low-level early career psychologist. And obviously, with the 1-year-old, I felt that it was important for me not to have that disruption in our attachment bonding process. And so I kind of reluctantly resigned my commission, crossed my fingers that I wasn't pulled up for individual ready reserves, and became a stay-at-home mom with him. I did that for several months and did a lot of painting and gardening with him, and realized that I wanted a little bit more engagement back in my profession. And so I started tiptoeing into private practice, very, very part-time, a few hours on the weekends, a few hours in the evening. So my husband and I were tag teaming parenting like many people do at this phase. So I didn't need to use childcare. It was just he and I sharing those responsibilities. Eventually, he started preschool, and then I started working while he was in preschool. I always really wanted to just work and see clients either when he could be with his dad or when he was at school. And so private practice really provided that opportunity to have a very flexible schedule. I could have easily, when I came back to the States, gotten a full-time GS government job with the military easily, but I didn't want that kind of rigid scheduling requirement. I wanted to be working secondary to my parenting.
Excellent. So what sort of area did you work in as a psychologist in particular, and how did you decide to specialize in that area?
Yeah. Interesting. When I got off active duty, I was certain, you think you know what you don't know. And I thought for certain I have all this experience with the military and family members of the military, and I'll get on the TRICARE military healthcare insurance plan, and they'll send me clients. But in the end, what happened was not that. What happened was that I started a practice in a neighborhood, and it became a neighborhood practice, kind of like a small town doctor's office. And so what we have now is a practice that is grown to over 20 providers. And each time there is a pocket of need that we don't provide, I set my sights on recruiting someone very good for that new thing. So I start with myself. I just see adults. I bring in another person. She and I just see adults, but there's so much need for teens and children. So I knew someone really good and I recruited them to see teens. And then there was a need for younger children. So I recruit somebody for that, and then for couples, and then for prescribing, and then for testing. And it kind of grows organically based on what are we not doing that there's demand for.
Right. Now, is that just on the psychological front, or is it also, right, okay.
Just strictly psychological. I have found that if I take too far of a step from the core service line, it's a very heavy lift from a marketing perspective, but people do very much appreciate what they call here one-stop shopping. That if they find a practice that they trust for their couples therapy, and they know that they have a child that's struggling with ADHD, they love that they can also have that need met without having to start the search process all over again.
Yeah. And while on the subject of, because I'm a great believer in psychosomatic illness, right?
Yeah.
So how prevalent do you think, and how much have you noticed that sorting the psyche out, the psychology, often helps with physical conditions, or actually prevents a physical condition from developing?
Absolutely. One of the things that we know is that if a person is feeling depressed, for example, that they're much more likely to experience pain signaling more deeply than other people who are not struggling with the mood issue. There is tremendous overlap on these areas. There is research going on this, but at the same time, I think we only know the tip of the iceberg about this. And I suspect strongly that 100 years from now, we will look back at this time and say, oh, how little we really knew about these things.
And I can speak from personal experience because, as you know, what is it? It's about 10 weeks now, I think, since I broke my neck again. Silly me. C5 was broken, and pain does become. I'm not sure whether it becomes more acute at night time. I think that it becomes more recognizable at night time because there's not much else going on. And
Exactly.
when I was in the high dependency ward, there was one nurse in with four of us at various conditions. And I found that there was one particular guy, he'd be quiet all day. And then round about 1:30 in the morning, he'd start
Yeah.
he'd start wanting to be attended to, he'd be asking for things, he'd be crying in pain. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, isn't that interesting?
And two things come to mind as you say that. One is that not only can depression, for example, make pain signaling more exquisitely noticed, but also chronic pain can lead to mood disorders, right? So there is a element to that. I do think that the common understanding right now is that in the evening, at night, when things are quiet and we have less distractions, we're more likely to notice pain. But I don't think that's the full story. I think there's more to it than that we just don't fully understand yet.
Yeah, I'm sure that's right because my pain, even though I'm pretty good at controlling it, it still gets to a point where it's hurting. And nighttime, it does become more noticeable for various reasons. Of course, uh, the body is such a complex
Yeah,
piece of
right.
machinery that there's still lots that we've got to learn. And I do agree that having control of your mind and understanding how the psyche works, and it's a word I've used quite regularly during our chat, can make such a difference, can't it?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that can contribute to suffering is this idea that whatever is happening to us shouldn't be happening to us. And so when we're having the experience, what we're thinking about the experience can amplify that. When you think about, like, let's say you're walking someplace and you've got a mile left to go until you get to your destination and it starts raining. You're just getting rained on. But if your thoughts are, I hate getting rained on, I hate being wet, this is the worst thing ever, then your suffering for walking in the rain will double,
Yeah.
right? And that's such a key part of it, is how we think about the experience.
And bringing it home in a sports sense. I mean, I prefer rugby myself, but when I'm looking at footballers, right, or soccer, I think you call it in the States,
Uh-huh.
the way that a footballer reacts when they get booked or when something doesn't go their way. I mean, some of them are right prima donnas, and others will just put the head down, think, right, okay, that's it, and just crack on. And it's all about whether you want to go for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but whether you want to go for the victim culture approach, or you just say, yeah, acceptance, because we were talking about stress, weren't we, before, and how to handle stress. Does that
Right. And
make sense?
this is something I'm sure you saw this as a parent too, is that when your child falls down and skins their knee on the playground or something, if you say, oh no, Tommy, are you okay? The tears will exponentially increase oftentimes, where if you're like, oh, you're going to be okay,
Yeah,
you're going to be fine. And that reassurance can help them calm down. And then their experience of that pain is
yeah,
less.
yeah.
And what happens ideally for children is that we get that proper modeling from our parents that's loving acceptance, but also doesn't amplify. And then we learn how to do that for ourselves, so that when we're adults and we fall, we think, oh, I'll be fine.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it's very helpful.
And the self-talk's really important because I remember we were always taught with first aid when I was 18 in basic training. So it doesn't matter what the situation looks like,
the first thing you say is you're going to be okay. We've got your back. We've got you. And sometimes we'd turn up and we'd be looking and think, wow, this is, but we're just smiling and saying, yeah, we've got you. Or if even if smiling, we're not looking agitated. We just remain calm and say, we got your back. You're okay. We're going to get you out of here.
It's so interesting when you think about post-traumatic stress, that oftentimes what we know is that if the person felt completely powerless in the moment of what was happening, they're more likely to have the residue of that trauma long after the event. If we have a sense of control when something bad is happening to us, it can buffer the long-term implication of that experience. And that's really part of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I'm glad that we agree. I'm glad you agree with me because you're obviously a specialist in your field. Now, with regards to stress, stress is a big thing. And someone asked me a question. In fact, someone said, Joe, can you direct me to one of your podcasts that has got something about stress? And I think who better to talk about anti-stress techniques, stress avoidance. What tips would you give to like avoid stress? I've got my own tips, but I'd like to hear it from your point, please.
So you and I were talking a little bit about how to think about stress management in the context of leadership or business owning. And one of the things that I have found, because I have lots of ideas for my business, I have more ideas than I could ever possibly execute, including even if I delegated to others, I have more ideas than my whole team could execute, probably. And so it's important to realize that you're not going to have time to do everything, and that you can't let the ideas that you don't have time to chase after be a source of stress. That you find yourself at peace with being selective on where you put your energy and okay with letting go of things that are of great value, but still you don't have time to do, right? And if you're going to delegate, that you're at peace with other people executing it in a way that may not be the way you would do it. And they may slip and stumble and even mess up at times, and that's okay too. And trying to have everything be perfect and the way you would do it is a tremendous recipe for stress.
Fantastic. That's great. That's a great tip. And I always, tongue in cheek, say, the one film I recommend you watch, Frozen. The animation Frozen. Let it go. Just listen to that story.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other thing is sometimes we get stressed, like they talk about in Buddhism, trying to make something possible that's not possible. Sometimes I have ideas that I think are brilliant, and I'll talk to people in the team and they'll shoot them down. And it might be disappointed at first, but if I really stay curious and hear people out, oftentimes they have better ideas or a refining of the idea that's going to make it a better idea and be more successful. And staying humble and curious and open to those things, I think, is another way to not just have a better outcome, but to reduce your stress.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting because I remember, and I still do say to my sons, right, if you've got a question, ask the question, because the only stupid question you could ask, the only stupid question is the one you didn't ask. And I bet you, if you're in a class or a collection of people, I bet you someone else wants to know that question as well. So you've got to take the brave step to ask the question, because even if a few people snigger, that doesn't matter. There'll be someone else who wants to know. And you've got the answer then, and you're empowered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right.
So what's happening now with your business, and where are you looking to take it? Because you started off in the Girl Guides, and you were really proud to get your awards and the badges and sewing them on. And then you recognized that your parents actually did say, yeah, that's equivalent. It's UK top. That's a fur cop, mate. The teacher got you're writing on the desk.
Yeah.
You bang to rights. Then you joined the military. You went to Italy. You had a son. You became a mother during that period. You came home, decided resign your commission, devote your time to the family, and then you got a bit of itchy feet. You set up your medical practice, which is a whirlwind of a tour. Meanwhile, your husband is serving in the military as well as a psychiatrist, and you jockey in parenting responsibilities, and now you've got a successful business and a psychology practice and I love the way that if you get a problem, instead of it letting it overwhelm you, you say, right, who else can I get to bring in to help me solve this problem? Because I can't do it on my own.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that that one of the things that I have found is that if the military does a wonderful job of teaching leadership skills. Certainly, when I was in Italy, they made me in charge of an small alcohol rehab center when I had no experience in leadership of any kind and was probably completely unqualified to do it. And thank goodness for the Italian secretary at that office who'd been there for years, because she kept me out of trouble and would very diplomatically say, "Dr. Carr, maybe we can do it this way," which was saying you're about to go down the wrong road. But I do think that throwing us into those leadership opportunities early on expedites our leadership training at such a higher rate than you would see in the civilian sector, certainly in the States. And that part has really prepared me for having this group practice. What did not prepare me, whether it be in school or the military, was the business side of things. Thank goodness, I think I had that entrepreneurial side, the selling Girl Scout cookies. And then later I used to make earrings and try to sell them at craft fairs. And while I was in high school, I learned how to decorate cakes and sold birthday cakes to people. And so I've always had kind of a little bit of a tickled passion for being in business. But nowhere along the lines did I really have any formal training in that. It's all kind of seat of your pants and self-taught. I think that's something that discourages a lot of military healthcare providers when they're getting off of active duty, whether they're leaving early or even after retirement after 20 years, from considering opening their own practice because they feel like they don't have any training in it whatsoever. And to them, I would say, it may not be as hard as you think it is, and it is very doable. Find the right mentors to help you and give it a go.
Well, that brings me nicely on to how important do you think having a good coach or mentor is? And by the sounds of it, your secretary in Italy was a bit of a mentor as well, even though she may not have worn the badge or had the title.
Yeah. I think it's critically important. I had some people who were doing podcasts even 20 years ago when I started my practice on giving advice about marketing for mental health. And I would consume those voraciously. That were very, very helpful to me in my early development. And I think it's essential if you want to start a business and you feel like you don't know anything about business, find someone who does. There are people out there who do, and get a mentor, and maybe even invest some money in paying for consulting so that you are not making a lot of mistakes that are costly.
Yeah. And sometimes you might say, "Oh, I can't afford a coach or a mentor." The actual mistakes that you make because you haven't got one could be far more costly.
Far more.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And by the sounds of it, and because you're such a positive person, and we share that trait, I believe, you've had a great life. You had no problems whatsoever. Everything's gone great for you, hasn't it? Oh, like transitioning from the military was dead easy. Let's put it into perspective. What challenges did you face when you were transitioning from the military to Civvy Street? Because obviously there were lots of things going on in your life at the time, weren't there?
Absolutely. I think as a child myself, I probably had separation anxiety issues when I was left at childcare and my mom had a full-time job and I had to be separated at a very young age and dropped off at childcare places. And so there's a vulnerability inside of me for when that old feeling is triggered. And when I would leave my son with my husband just to see a couple of patients on a Tuesday night, he would be sobbing and blood and tears running down his face. And that was really hard for me, really, really hard for me. In fact, now we have a dog that comes with me to the office for animal assisted therapy. And really that entirely started originally because he was having separation anxiety. And again, it kind of triggered that soft spot in me. And I thought, well, if I'm going to bring him to work, I better learn how to do it properly. And I started taking classes in animal assisted therapy.
Wow.
But I think that one was hard for me is finding that balance between pursuing and getting back into the career and the needs of my child.
That's fantastic. And while on the theme of things don't always go to plan, how do you deal with failure and understanding that failure isn't fatal, but how do you deal with it when it does occur?
I think although I did get some mentorship via podcasts and things like that, that was just available out in the internet, I did not hire anyone to do consulting early on. And I think retrospectively that the business grew very, very slowly in the first 10 years relative to what it could have done if I had been a little bit more strategic and aggressive about that mentorship in the early phase. Now, I was kind of ambivalent about being busy anyway, because we had structured our whole life around just my husband's single income, and I was in no hurry to get busy. But yeah, I think in retrospect, if I needed to get busy more quickly, if I needed the business to grow more rapidly, I would say get that help earlier on. Because like you said, you think you're saving money, not spending it. But if it takes you 10 years to grow a business that you could have grown in 3, how much did it cost you in opportunity cost?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So when you've come to a position and a decision where you recognize that there's an opportunity to deliver extra sessions in a different type of therapy, to do that, you don't just put a notice on your shop window or on your door. So how important is it, do you think, for someone to develop a strong social or business network so they know who they can call on and when?
I am incredibly, maybe even to a fault, conservative when it comes to hiring. I have had 4-hour interviews on Saturdays with people I was considering. I have hired very, very slowly because I've been afraid of hiring the wrong person and not wanting to take a chance with it, to the point where it probably slowed the growth of the business. We've been very fortunate, for example, that when my husband retired from active duty and joined the practice, he helped to recruit the next 2 prescribers that he had known for 20 years who were also retiring from the military.
Right, okay.
Like that level of knowledge of somebody. If we've known someone for 20 years, it feels like the risk is very, very low. Hiring somebody that is a stranger to you after a 1-hour conversation feels really daunting in comparison. And so, yes, knowing people in the community and going to networking events and finding out who your peers are can help you to ease that process when you do want to hire. Once there is some traction, once the business gets to a certain size, now I can say to my current staff, we really could use another child therapist. Do you know anyone? Because if they recommend the person that they know, they don't want to bring someone into the practice that they're not going to like or that they're not going to be proud of. And so internal referrals have been incredibly powerful in helping the business grow in the second half of the lifespan of the business.
Yeah, and by the way, this philosophy spans across all businesses. There's the hire fast, fire slowly, or the hire slow, fire fast. I like the hire slow, fire fast, actually, really, because I think that works better. When you discover someone's not fitting in, then
the longer you wait, the more catastrophic things could happen. And you just, once you know it's a problem, the longer you wait, you're just taking on unnecessary additional risk. I absolutely agree with that. And I think that for me, one of the biggest challenges in starting a private practice is that we had just moved back to the area from Italy. After living in Italy for 3 years, I didn't know anyone in Maryland, and no one knew me, more importantly. And so starting a practice and just getting referrals to me was a challenge at first because of that being an unknown quantity.
Yeah, it's quite daunting, isn't it? I mean, I remember when I set up a business, I was away from my hometown. I just left the military. I was 230 miles away. I set up my financial advisor business. I just thought, let's go for it. Let's just get out there and do it. So thank you for sharing that. I would like you to think about what's the one top tip you would give to a veteran or a business owner that's listening, the one top tip that you would give to someone who maybe is having a bit of a challenge or is in business and wants to expand the business 10 times it or even double it? If they're going through a bit of a topsy-turvy time, what's the one tip you would give?
I think that what I would say is that I remember my father briefly experimented with multi-level marketing. And I went to one of the motivational talks that he attended, and they said, when you're down, call up. And when you're up, call down. And what they were talking about is if you're feeling discouraged in whatever you're trying to work on, find a mentor, someone that's ahead of you in the game that you respect and is your champion, and reach out to them and let them give you support when you're feeling down. And when you're feeling really on top of your game and like everything is coming up roses, then find those people that are below you, that are coming up behind you, and give them some encouragement. And I think that is a very helpful philosophy just to remember.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's great. Thank you very much. So that's like, ask for help when you need it and you're not doing that well. And when you reach where you want to go and you can see there's a few stragglers, if you can help, put your hand down, give them a pull up. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So now, you mentioned before about how the military equipped you in many, many ways. How transferable do you think the skills are that you developed and learned in the military to your everyday life in civilian street now?
I think that surprisingly transferable. And I think that the single value that was most helpful to me was this idea that what are we here as officers? What is our primary responsibility? It's to take care of enlisted people and to help them be successful and to have success in the mission, whatever the mission is. And having that heart of service for my industry, but I think it's probably true in any business industry, you cannot think of the people that work for you as they're working for me, they have to do what I tell them to do, but more in terms of these are people who are trying to have careers that they're proud of, that they feel a sense of mission about, and that we're supporting them in their success. And when they're successful, they will help us look successful and be successful. And so that heart of service, I think, has served me very, very well in practice development.
That's great, and that's just brought to mind a book that I'm reading at the minute, and it goes back through decades, in fact centuries, of how different conservative approaches, liberal approaches, socialist approaches have worked, and I think that being an employer, someone who is responsible for other people's life, is a big responsibility, and
right.
There are so many people, I believe. I think that they're in the minority. There are so many people who do not understand just how important it is when they come into work, smile and make the workplace a pleasant place, if that makes sense, which I'm sure you do. And it's such a worthy responsibility, isn't it, to be a provider for other people.
Yeah, the other thing that the military helped me with was in parenting, in the sense that I remember being taught this idea that when a person has messed up and there has to be some sort of consequence, that the consequence should sort of fit the crime in this sense. And how that applies in parenting is, for example, my son had a best friend that was about 4 doors down from our house. And he would frequently go to his friend's house. And I would say, you have to be home at 5:45 to help set the table and get ready for dinner because we're going to eat dinner at 6. And he would start creeping a little bit lower and a little bit later and a little bit later and show up at 2 minutes till 6. And now I've set the table because he's not there. In typical, I think, American parenting, they might say, well, you have been late too many times. I'm taking away your iPad for a week or something like that, right? But I thought from my military training, well, okay, what does that mean if the punishment fits the crime? Well, he is taking away time from me. I'm doing his tasks for him because he's late. So he needs to give back by doing tasks for me because he is late. So I said to him, okay, here's what we're going to do. If you're late again, you going to have to clean the cat box for me because that's one of my jobs, but I had to set the table for you. So you're going to do my job for me since I did your job for you. And he hemmed and hawed, and he only had to do it once, and he was never late again.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah, because you got to make it painful enough, just not too painful.
But not too painful, and not feel like it's random, but to have the respect to say the reason that we're doing this is because you are taking away from my time. And so we're going to make it fair by having you give back in kind. The amount of time you took away from me, you're going to give back to me. And then that's going to keep our relationship strong. When he was wearing Invisalign, for teeth, for straightening his teeth, he was at an age where brushing his teeth wasn't a top priority, and you can't just put those plates onto dirty teeth. It can be dangerous. You could get cavities and things like that. And I thought, well, many parents would either yell at their kid about it, or they would sit there and watch them, which I didn't want to spend my time doing that. And so I said to him, every night when you're brushing your teeth, I want you to use your cell phone and take a video of you brushing your teeth. Say the date and the time, and I will spot check your phone for videos from time to time to make sure you're doing it, which put the burden on him and not me. It took me just a moment every week to check, and it got him on track with what he needed to do. And I think that's that kind of creative problem solving when you have a dilemma. I feel like I learned a lot about that while I was in the military.
That's very good. Yeah, that's a great top tip. So what does the future hold for you? And what, before we move on to that, actually, what is there, if anything, what other point would you like to bring forward that we've discussed and has not been triggered yet during our conversation?
I guess the next thing I think that we talked about discussing is this question of the arc of your career and what do those final chapters look like? And because you are working full-time, if you stay until retirement, you might want to start a private practice, but you may not want to be hustling with a private practice for another 20 years. And so the question is, what are you trying to grow that is sustainable, but also in line with being semi-retired, which most of us are trying to be after a certain time in the military?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm working now, is in this question of how do I follow that arc into a semi-retired state while still supporting my team and the business.
Yeah, and that's a tough call because I suppose the best way to do it is to be able to delegate, where you then become the provider and the director, if you like, the conductor of the orchestra that delivers the service while you can be overseeing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the hardest things for me in the last couple of years was realizing that the practice had grown to a size where I could no longer be a full-time therapist and run a large practice. Yeah. Because what happens is then you have two full-time jobs, which was not the goal. And I think sometimes we don't see it coming until it's too late. And then you one day and you realize, oh, I have two full-time jobs. And at that point, people have to make a difficult choice, I think, in my profession, of either cutting way back on their direct patient care or getting rid of the group practice structure, because you can't sustain both. Yeah,
which comes back to the social and business network, because I have a great team that supports me so I can deliver what I need to deliver, whether it be mastermind programs or coaching programs. And I can deliver all of that simply because I've got a great team supporting me to do all the other stuff, because I wouldn't be able to do it. There'd be too many plates spinning and juggling balls and everything. Yeah. So
right. And what I say to people is there's no right or wrong answer. It's not that you have to stop doing direct services in the service of being in management, or that you have to outsource a lot of management so that you can continue doing direct service. You just have to decide, where is your heart and what do you want to do and what do you have a passion for, and then flesh out the other responsibilities to the appropriate skilled people to do that.
And that's a great point, because you just triggered something for me. I don't know whether it's the same policy in school in the US, I remember being told when I was a young child, you've got to work on your weaknesses, O'Connor. And now I don't bother working on my weaknesses because I work on my strengths and I delegate my weaknesses, which means that I'm not well, I'm invincible pretty much because I've got a team that does what I'm not good at.
There used to be a folk song that this the title of it was "Don't Should on Me and I Won't Should on You."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that we tend to have this kind of moralistic feeling like if we're not good at something, then we should work on that because it's a failure on our part. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. You can't be good at everything.
No.
I'm not good at bookkeeping. One of the best things I did early on in the practice, before there was hardly anybody in the group, was to hire someone to do the bookkeeping because that's not my strength at all. And I think you're absolutely right. It's much more efficient. And you're more likely to have a strong organization if everybody is really good at the things that they're doing, at the piece of the elephant that they had their hand on.
Yeah. Sure. Well, I mean, I know I'd love to keep talking. I know we could talk for absolutely hours. I do want to get this. I want to get this question in now because, you've touched on it a little bit. We don't work forever. And there's other things in life, and we have to let things go and realize we move on and build a team. So, what does the future hold for you, your husband, your family, your team? What do you want to do?
So we purchased an Airstream trailer. It's the silver bullet looking campers.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and we really love to travel. We want to see as much of the US as we can and Canada. And so my goal is to get to where my leadership and quality support of my people can be done virtually, even when I'm on the road, and that maybe I might be out of town 50% of the time. In order to do that, it's a question of finding the best people to do the best pieces, give away things. I stopped seeing clients almost entirely. It's a very, very small part of what I do now. And mostly the leadership things I do, I can do virtually with just a good internet connection. And so part of that for me is I do have a vision that I would love to see the practice stay for another 100 years, and I'm not going to be here for another 100 years. And so I want to memorialize everything to make it as formulaic as possible, that anybody could replicate our success that takes over those leadership pieces, and that they're not reinventing the wheel. So I think for me in this last chapter, it's really about how do I help create documents for other people to know how to pick up the baton and run with it with success. And to start to back myself out more and more so that I'm still here as a net and as an advisor as we start that transition process.
That's a fabulous goal because I've got the same sort of goal with the mastermind program, creating a legacy that I can leave long after I'm gone, that other veterans and business owners can use. And it's about doing good in the world. I think generally, and correct me if I'm wrong or let me have your opinion on this, generally, there are a lot more good people in the world than there are bad. The bad ones just move around a lot, and it seems like there's a lot of them. There's not really, is there?
Yeah. We know that sociopathy is about 4% of the population, which is more than eating disorders. So the problem is that the people who are bad people, they may be small in numbers, but they're large in the impact that they have. You know, one mean person might send 10 people to therapy in their life. Right. And so unfortunately, that's the problem. But the vast majority of people are good. And if you have a lens where you assume the best in people, you will also bring out the best in people.
Yeah. You've just triggered another statistic because as we talk, it just triggers off things for me. I heard, and this figure 21 comes for so many things about amputees. It takes 21 days before they recognize. The 21 that I heard was if somebody's told a bad thing about them or a comment, it takes a lot of opposites, good things to be said about them before it wipes out. The figure 21 springs to mind. But I mean, for every one bad comment, you have to give them a positive impact of 21 times or something like that.
We have a marriage researcher here in the States who says it's 6 to 1 in marriage. If you say something negative to your partner, you better say 6 more positive things to kind of balance it out. And most people I talk to say, I think it's much more than that. And I think that's right, because when we hear a criticism from someone that's really important to us in particular, it can be so painful that it takes a lot to repair it. It's really one of the reasons why I think self-control and being able to pump the brakes and be careful about our words with others is so important, because repairing something after we've done it is a much heavier lift and more difficult than to avert disaster in the first place.
Yeah, because once it's said, you can't unsay it. And
Right.
that's why a top tip I was given, and you know what? It really helps me. If I receive an email and I think, wow, what's that all about? And then all of a sudden, I'll wait before I respond to it. I might write the response straight away. I won't send it for 24 hours though.
Yes. And there's so much in terms of tools to help us with these things now. If you have, for example, a customer at your business who's very unhappy with you about something, you can now describe that problem to an AI system and say, I'd like to write a diplomatic response in the language written by a senior crisis managing professional. And you write a beautiful first draft of that email response, and you can read through it and put it into your own voice, but it's got you 95% of the way there at that point. Because sometimes emotion runs away with us, and sleeping on it for a night can help displace that. But sometimes just getting some objective, dispassionate feedback is also really, really helpful.
That's a great tip. Do you know what? I'm gonna use that one if that's okay. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
So listen, I found our chat fascinating, really helpful. How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. I would love to connect with everybody. I have a Elizabeth Carr LinkedIn account. It's Kentland's Psychotherapy. So if you put that in the show notes, people can find that as well. And once you have my face and you know my name, you can find me on LinkedIn and we can connect there. And then if anybody wants to direct message me, they can get me there as well.
That's absolutely fantastic. Dr. Elizabeth Carr, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Such a pleasure talking to you today.
JoeTeams.com is a resource I have created to fulfill my mission to help 1 million veterans and business entrepreneurs like you achieve the goals, dreams, and aspirations they deserve. JoeTeams.com is jam-packed full of valuable resources specifically designed to help you on your journey to success. Visit joeteams.com now to find out how you can join and start your journey to success immediately. That's joeteams.com, JOETEAMS, joeteams.com. And until we meet again, have a brilliant day.